What's up, guys? Welcome to the 21st episode of the Awarenezzz podcast. Today we're here with our guest, Nick O'Brien. Thank you very much for being here. And yes, introduce yourself to the people.
Hey, I appreciate you guys having me on today. I'm excited to get going and roll with you and chat about all things coaching, strength conditioning, all that stuff. So I'm ready.
Oh, perfect, Nick. I appreciate you from being here, man. And there's so many things that we want to talk about here today. You've been an athlete, you've been a coach for the collegiate level, and now you're working more on the tactical side. But let's start a little bit more from the beginning. So since you were younger, I know you played as an athlete. Run us a little bit of how that process was.
Yeah, so my athletic career wasn't very illustrious, but it was there, and I loved sports kind of growing up. I was a Marine Corps brat, so I traveled around the country a lot, following my dad around. So every sport kind of changed based off the season and based off of like where we were located, like in the country. So I never really got to stick with one too close, but ended up playing like 3 different sports in high school, and then got to college and ended up like teaching myself and trying to walk on the lacrosse team at my university, and ended up getting injured pretty bad and tore my glute like right in the fall. So kind of spun things out of control a little bit for me. And I kind of fell into coaching at that point. So it kind of worked out. But from there, like as I was coaching and kind of starting off in the career, I got pretty heavily involved in strongman. I had a couple mentors, and I had one in particular, like Andy Deck, that worked with me. He was a professional. And it was nice to kind of like learn from him and really get that stuff under my belt and pick up a new sport and kind of find a new love for something, because I felt like I missed those chances when I was young, bouncing around.
Okay.
Did that for about, I still do it off and on, but not too much competing in anymore. I did that for about 6 years, and then again moved for another job out to California, and it was harder to do strongman, and started doing Highland game, like Scottish Highland games. So I've been doing that for about 8 years now, whenever I can kind of get a chance between all my obligations coaching. But fell in love with another sport and got to teach myself how to throw and go outside in the sun and have a few beers and throw some heavy stuff in the woods. It's not a bad way to spend the day. So it's always been some sports. It's been some odd sports and team sports, but it's always kind of been something that I've gravitated to and enjoyed kind of picking up something new, and gives me something to train for in the weight room for sure.
It sounds like an interesting career, like a lot of strength and power in those sports. And you mentioned you trained yourself or like coached yourself into the lacrosse team. How did that come that you trained on your own?
So a lot of my friends were ended up playing. Like some of my best friends were already playing on the team, and I was in Maryland at the time, and like Maryland's one of the big hotbeds for lacrosse. So by the time you get to your senior season, like of high school, and you've never played before, it's pretty much too late. All those guys are getting like full scholarships, full rides to a lot of places. Like I can't remember if that year they won state championships or they were runner up at like our division level. So all those guys were going off to play pretty high level. And I wanted to play catch up, and ended up just kind of grinding away and got to college and like took the opportunity to try to walk on. And was like, at that point, I think I rode it till the wheels fell off and got injured. But it worked out. I kept playing club after that point on. And at that point I was coaching a lot too. So club made it a little bit more fun. I could go at my leisurely pace a little bit, still kind of be competitive and go out and play the games. But it was just kind of relying on my friends and like trying to play catch up, because the rest of the sports were done after high school. So it was on to kind of different things at that point.
Yeah, like it gave you the chance to keep going into the sports. And you said that you got injured, and that's what ultimately got you more involved into coaching. How did that process go, man? Like, did you always have coaching in mind, or is that something that came up as you got injured?
Yeah, to be honest, like I had no idea what I was going to do going into college, and I didn't really know what the realm was going to be. I was going to try to follow my dad and kind of go into the Marine Corps. I got medically disqualified for something that I really wanted to do because I'm competitive. So I wanted to do something I thought was cooler and harder than him. And it just didn't kind of pan out. And I ended up going just trying to find a route and like try to stay in sports because I knew that was one thing that I loved and I wasn't very good at it. So I knew playing was out of the question, really. So I originally went to school to try to do athletic training. And within like the first day, talking to a guidance counselor and like seeing what that was going to entail and them telling me it was going to take 5 years to graduate instead of 4, I immediately changed my major like that day. And I was out. And I think within that week too, I found the strength coach at my school, like Salisbury, Matt Nine, and he let me start volunteering and interning with the school and just being around the teams. And there was a ton of coaches there that time that from now, like looking back, like you couldn't have asked for anything better. Like one went on to compete in Olympic weightlifting at a high level, got his doctorate. Another one became like 11-time Team USA powerlifter, pulled 814 raw. Another guy got his doctorate in physical therapy, was a pro strongman. And then I think the coaches that were there became now 3 of the other coaches became Division I head coaches, all at the time that I was there, like my first year interning. So I was kind of hooked at that point, and I was like, I can be around sports. I can make this a career, which I had no idea was possible. And I mean, it's been kind of the thing ever since.
Of course, man.
Of an environment immediately.
Yeah, it was a hotbed. No one really knew it at the time. And like I said, if I could take that back and if I could bottle it up, that would be a pretty cool experience. I think anybody that's in there, like it was sink or swim, and those guys like were not letting go. And there's a lot of other volunteers or interns around the time that kind of bailed on the profession. But if you really liked it and you enjoyed being in there and you were kind of putting in the hours and putting in the work, they were all super helpful and it was enjoyable to be around. So I try to remember that and kind of carry that in my coaching career still now.
Oh, definitely. And you said that this was in a high school?
No, this was at college at Salisbury University.
It was in a college. So okay, it was there. Oh, it was a lot of high level people in that specific place. Like, and this is something that we see a lot from the athletes that we've interviewed. They always, from the beginning of their career, have something in their environment that allows them to get to that next level. But you also mentioned your dad being a Marine Corps as well. And then all these different coaches that got you more into coaching. So you would say that specific experience was what ultimately led you to say, okay, this is actually what I want to do.
Yeah, I'd say that, like being around them and kind of not really sure about what I wanted to do with a career. It fell in the right time. Like it was the right place, kind of right time thing. Honestly, like I've talked to a lot of coaches. I've talked to interns about it as well. Like throughout my time in the coaching profession, and a lot of people didn't really know that you could do coaching at this level, like at the college level, or you can make a career out of it nowadays, like high school, tactical setting, professional setting. Like people knew it was there, but I think that understanding that it was more than just like a personal trainer. It was more than just like a health and fitness person. It was someone that is like a valuable member and part of a team. Like I didn't realize that was a possibility until I got there. And all those coaches, like I mentioned, that I was surrounded by, they were all in grad school. Like, none of them were full-time coaches yet. There was only
like
one.
Everybody was in their starting point as well.
Yeah, and they were that like qualified. And I think every young coach that comes into the like no matter if it's someone 3 months ahead of you or 3 years ahead of you, it seems like light years, and you're just taking everything in like a fire hose. And I knew those guys were way far ahead of me. And I listened to every single word they said, and I took it as much as possible. Like, I'm not going to say I skipped every class, but I learned way more from being in the weight room with them and just shooting the shit and talking to them and training with them and lifting with them and asking them questions than I ever did like going to class and reading the book. I can do that stuff on my own. That experience like really solidified it. And then seeing how they interacted with the athletes and seeing the feedback from the athletes and the success they had on the field and how much they enjoyed kind of training. It was kind of what set me over the edge and made me really want to stay in that career and start a career in it.
No, definitely, man. And I mean, of course, I suppose you know even more that one thing is to have that theoretical knowledge that the university gives you, but then another thing is to put it in practice, and then having the opportunity to be inside that environment with the coaches, like being in those sessions, well, gave you the opportunity to have that practical experience. And then when you started coaching, was it, of course, like you started in the college, but then like actually when you started being professional, how did that process started? You started in the collegiate level?
Like actually going full time?
Yeah.
Yeah, like in the collegiate side, like if everybody is kind of knows, or maybe isn't aware, the running joke is you have to have a master's degree to get an internship, an unpaid internship. And it's a bad joke, but it's actually like pretty true. Like over the course of my time, I've done 5 unpaid internships at the Division I level or Division III level for my first school. And like a lot of that experience like set me up for success to like get a full-time job, because it's a very saturated profession and there's a lot of people that want to get into it, and it's pretty cutthroat when it comes to a lot of like high level places or just limited opportunities for people to get in. So you got to do everything you can. I think getting those experiences helped me a lot, but really when I got a full-time position after that, like I could rely back on all that experience and I wouldn't trade it for anything else, because I think I would have been a lot more lost in that first full-time job without having those mentors or having that experience on the front end. But I felt way more prepared for it based off of just reps, coaching, having those conversations, interacting with different athletes, seeing different sports and stuff that I wouldn't have gotten if I just went directly into a full-time role. I wouldn't have been prepared. And some of these coaches, like depending on where you go, like their job is on the line. They're going to eat you alive. Yeah.
Like doing that progressive, having that progressive approach of just building your way into it, definitely like gave you benefits. And we actually 2 days ago had the chance to interview a strength and conditioning intern for Ohio State. He was telling how beneficial this is, because he also was an intern in NC State. So how these 2 experiences had been very beneficial for him, and that the amount of knowledge and the amount of value he got from those experiences, not only from the athletes, but then also from the coaches, and then just being immersed in that environment of high level sports.
Especially in jobs like where you have to work with other people, like we said, if you sit in a classroom and read a book, you're not going to learn that much than being actually in the environment, in the weight room, and interacting with the people you want to work in the future.
Definitely, man.
Sure.
And I was talking more about the training part. I just to kind of like get us introduced to that part. What are like the main pillars that you look at in the strength and conditioning program for an athlete?
Yeah, so most of the time you're just kind of looking at reverse engineering, like what the sport is, especially when you're talking about an athlete. Like ultimately, the biggest thing is their sport and like being prepared to play their sport, and capability and being and readiness and availability are huge. So if you're not preparing the athlete to endure like a season, endure a match, a game, whatever it is, like stretched out, especially when you're talking about collegiate or pro level for a long competitive season, like then you're doing them a disservice. And then even more so, if you're only thinking about that in-season side of it and you're not stretching out and continuing training like through the whole annual process, then it's a problem. Like some of the big pillars are like pretty like general, and the strength, power, speed, like coordination, all the things that you're going to look for when you like kind of go through and do a needs analysis and really just, like I said, reverse engineer what the sport entails and what the specific components that you need to do in order to be successful at that sport. And then kind of how that coach wants to play, like what type of system, like how they technically and tactically want to set up, because that can play a big component into the style they want to play. You need to make sure that that is at least talked about and at least kind of built into your program, because especially when it comes to assessments or any sort of preparation, because a lot of the time you're preparing them for practice, and like the coach already knows that practices are going to prepare them for the games. So as a strength coach, especially on the college side, like if you're not preparing that, if you're only preparing them for a game and not like a coach who's probably exceeding like some of that intensity and volume in a training session, then they're already going to be ill prepared and they're going to get injured. And that's why a lot of times you end up seeing like a lot of injuries from fall sports, because they don't have that same training adaptation and like built up time for preseason in the summer, like based off of constraints from NCAA or like financial constraints for certain universities that can't bring people back. But like spring sports usually are at advantage because they get the whole fall to prepare.
No, definitely, man. And I think it's a very, very interesting approach of just preparing them for the training, and that training is going to prepare them for the games. And I just had a doubt when you said it really depends on how the coach wants to play. Do you mean, for example, I mean, I play soccer, so I'm just going to put a soccer example. If it's a play that uses his left backs a lot, like do you have some like a different approach with those left backs so they're able to withstand those loads?
Yeah, so like talking in soccer terms, like I had at one school when I was at Loyola, we had a lot of our wingers would want to run up and down the field, and they'd cover a ton of ground, but not as much as like still our central midfield. And some of those wingers would exceed speeds of like 20 miles an hour, like just on long bursts, like without the ball, because they're looking to try to make a backdoor play. They're trying to at least create space and open up. So we'd end up incorporating a little bit more high threshold, like longer duration sprints for them, because they weren't necessarily changing direction in those tight spaces quite as often as a central midfielder that's trying to win the ball back quick and is trying to make like ticky-tack plays and like get the ball into space. But in the same breath, like if you have a coach that is just moving and playing full half field and trying to get everybody down the field more, like maybe it's a more balanced approach, and your wingers are playing a flat back system and they're involved in the play, but they're not making those kind of sweeping runs. So I'd say it's more of like a cherry on top, because you can still be anybody, whether it's an athlete or it's general population, like 80 to 90% of the training that you're going to do, like the movements and stuff, is going to be very similar. It's how you dose it, like when you put it into a program, how often you put it into a program, the intensity at which you can do it. But everybody fundamentally is going to move certain ways, and having some of those like foundational principles in your program are perfect. This is just like when you're really looking for that extra edge, you're really trying to make sure that stuff is dialed in so you can be competitive on game day and really like exceed the standard.
Yeah, and I don't know if you would agree with me, but then, like as you mentioned, almost everybody has the access to that 90% of things, which is, okay, these are the foundational movements, these are the things that we want to work on. But then that part of the execution, the amount of load that you put into it, the intent with which you do the exercises, those little 5% at the end of the day are the ones that make the difference, no?
No, for sure. I mean, 45-pound bar weighs like 45 pounds across the board, but 45 pounds to someone could be 50% of their max. And it also could be the easiest warm up of all time for an Olympic weightlifter. So like the intensity and like the relation that it has to an individual person makes a big difference. So everybody squats. Like, look at how many people sit down at a desk every day, and like everybody goes to the bathroom at some point during the day. Like, everybody squats. Like, it's a foundational movement. Everybody like does a lunge going up this, like a knee flexion, like a single leg knee flexion, like going up the stairs. So all those movements are already being done on a daily basis. It's just the application that you're trying to get ready for a sport, trying to be competitive. You have external stimulus, and you're going to be dealing with contact and high intensity, change direction. Like, you're going to be fighting on the ball, have like isometric movements where you're actually jostling and getting ready for that body contact. Like, that's where the nuances start coming in. And that's where like you start working with sport coaches a little bit more to see if you need to work on different buckets and fill in the gaps of maybe where their training lacks, or where you need to like complement what they're doing on the field so that they can be successful. Because a lot of sports are repetitive in nature, especially like soccer is cyclical. It's just a lot of running, a lot of accelerations, decelerations, a lot of volume on running. So what are you going to do to kind of counteract that and keep them safe on the field so they can continue to execute those movements repeatedly? What can we do in the weight room to make sure that we mitigate some of those risks by preparing them for those things?
Okay, definitely, man. And of course, like, you start from the sport, and then based on the sport and the goals that specific sport has, based on the amount of, for example, running that's involved, the amount of changing direction that's involved, you start planning out the program so it relates to the sport as much as possible. And then if there's an outlier, or for example, somebody that doesn't necessarily have like a good starting point to do the same program as everybody else, do you have standards for it already? Or do you do like a different program for them so they can kind of like catch up? Or how do you approach that scenario?
It depends on the program. It depends on the team. Like, there's always going to be standards for the program. If you're talking like performance metrics and like things of that nature that either are field based or weight room and like strength training based, like, yeah, there's going to be standards, but they're more tailored to the specific team and like maybe the level of play. Because it's one thing to go in and say, okay, well, everybody needs to have a 400-pound back squat. Like, is that really necessary to play the sport? And then also, if you say 400-pound back squat for a soccer player, like, is that really necessary? A 400-pound squat is probably a lot more important for a football player, and even more than that for certain positions and certain body types and like the level of play you're at. And then it starts to get even more so. Like, a professional football player probably needs to be a lot stronger than a high school football player. So you tailor, I think, those metrics to the goals of your program and kind of see where everybody's at. But at the end of the day, like, some of those key performance like factors that you're looking for can't just be like quantifiable and like really just weight room or dependent on a number, because some of your most skilled athletes are not going to like hit those thresholds. So I think more so setting standards is you're looking at development for each of your athletes and maybe setting some goals for them based off that. But you can drive some of those metrics and standards with the majority of your team, because that's competition in the weight room, that's progress, that's development that you're going to see. And I can't think of any athlete that would not do better by being stronger in some aspects. And I know there's a point of diminishing returns, but a lot of people aren't getting close to that like threshold yet. So there's a lot of things I think you can do that'll improve your performance as long as you're making sure that you're watching all the other metrics so that you're not getting worse on the field. That's the number one thing. Like if you're, whatever your sport is, if you're getting worse and you're trying to like lose body weight, not helping. Like the pitchers, linemen, like if you play better, you feel better, you might not look better, like maybe a little bit higher body fat percent, but you throw 99 or you pancake someone on the line, don't care. It's all about performance.
Yeah. Said the same. Yeah.
If you would need to come up with a test for a whole team, do you think it would make sense to like look at the relative force or strength of an athlete rather than like giving exact numbers? Because like you said, like for I don't know, like a 2-meter center back would be easy to lift 20 pounds, and for the small striker would be harder for him. Do you think it would make sense to use the relative strength, like the metric?
Yeah, I've always liked using relative strength. Like obviously, like absolute strength and having those metrics is important. But I mean, you could already take those metrics from your relative strength numbers all the time. And like, there's a lot of sports I've used that for, especially ones that like need body weight measurements, like wrestling. Like that's huge. Like you're already going to be at a specific body weight all the time. And when we used to train them in season and they're already cutting weight, like knowing what their max is in the off season, like say they have a 315 bench, but then they're at 205 and their wrestling weight is 197 or 191, whatever the weight class is, I could forget. Like that 315 doesn't really count anymore. Like I need to start using relative strength a little bit more so that I can tailor the program. So it makes it even more functional to like actually work with those numbers, to just test to test. Like I want more than just that number. I want it to be kind of purposeful. Absolute is kind of cool at the end of the day, but relative strength I think is more applicable and probably more work on your end, but better in the long run for your performance.
Okay, definitely, man. And now that we're talking a little bit about how you program and how you approach this the training program for a specific athlete, I wanted to try like a specific scenario with you and then maybe see what type of program we come up with. So let's say we have a freshman soccer player that his coordination isn't too good. I mean, he has like the basic movement foundations of somebody, nothing too crazy, nothing super bad. And you guys are in season and he has the availability of 4 days to train. What would you focus on in this scenario?
Just general coordination?
Yeah, like his movement foundations aren't necessarily super good. Like it's just average.
Yeah, I think especially soccer players, like the kind of movements they're going to have. Like I know I stole one of the movements, like this movement halo, from one of my old colleagues at UNF, Marcus Richardson, and he used to use it all the time. And it's close space cuts, and it's all 360 degrees. So being able to like get to a position and move quickly forward, like at 45 degrees, 90, like all the way around the circle, like that halo, like that's crucial. Being able to, especially for a soccer player that's going to use like a lot of single leg unilateral movements too, like being able to lunge in every pattern is huge, especially female like athletes, female soccer players. Cause I mean, they're riddled with ACL injuries, like non-contact or contact alike. So like, I'm talking like forward lunges, like 45 degree lateral, like drop lunges, reverse lunges, Cossack lunges, like crossover lunges, like all those things and like different versions of step ups. I always tried to find ways to incorporate into it, because even if someone didn't understand the pattern, we could do it in the warm up and we could slow it down. We could load it on certain days. We could do it in higher intensities for strength movements on certain patterns. And we could also like easily translate that over to the field, like I said, and speed it up. So it's one of the best like kind of catch-alls because you can apply it in every single way. And if you're talking about coordination, like it's so much adductor and abductor strength, like you're getting a lot of like like anterior and posterior like chain training from that, and single leg training. Take your shoes off, be in cleats, be like in the weight room, like change the surface. Like I can't think of anything better, especially for a soccer player, even hockey player, or anybody that's changing direction quickly. That's like one of my go-tos, and hitting it from every single angle.
Okay. So kind of like single leg movements with awkward direction, like different directions, different positions, to kind of like make it as sport specific as possible.
Yeah, and especially if you're gonna stretch it out over 4 days as well, like hitting a couple of those patterns. Like I always used to go, if I had 2 days, if it was just being like unilateral work, then I'll hit a directional day and I'll hit a diagonal day. So just like for a directional day, I'm going forward, lateral, reverse. And if I'm going diagonal, like teaching them initially, I'm going 45 degrees forward. I'm going a drop lunge. So it's kind of a lateral lunge where you're actually turning 90 degrees. And then I'm going a curtsy lunge or a bowler lunge where you're actually taking that step leg, dropping it behind your body on the support side. So like if you ever see like that back position, like of a bowler, like when you cross, like drop that leg back. So it's just like that. And it forces that stability, like that stabilizing knee, to be able to control and coordinate in so many different planes. And then it forces you to be a little bit stronger on that side. And you're going to see that if you freeze frame anybody decelerating or taking off and starting and accelerating, trying to stop in positions, or you're going to see that same knee pattern if anybody's colliding with anybody, everybody's trying to fight off the ball. It's just an easy way to kind of mimic a lot of the things that are going to happen on the field in a safer manner, and prepare them and strengthen it so they're ready.
Definitely. So you would divide the days based on the movement patterns that you're going to work on. And then considering that they're in season and they have 4 days to train it, how would you manage the load in this aspect?
Yeah, so like it depends on the season. Like in season, like your intensity can kind of go up on certain days, but like I said, like when we're talking about programming and reverse engineering, you have to know when their match days are. So like if I have those 4 days, it's going to be a little bit dependent on when the match days, and like college too, like when they're traveling and what the coach kind of views practice. Like a lot of times in college, especially for soccer, we're playing usually 2 matches a week, especially when we start. And then maybe when we get to conference, we're playing 1 on an odd week. And then you're traveling potentially 2 of those games too. So like I like to take a high-low model if the coach allows me to have more opportunities to train. So like 2 higher intensity days, 2 lower intensity days, without trying to have anything in the middle. But a lot of my training is really based off of what the coach has planned. So if your coach is kind of thinking that most of their quote unquote strength training or quote unquote agility, plyometric stuff is just going to come from practice, then what I'm doing in training kind of has to take a back seat, and I have to focus on real strength because they're not really getting it on the field. And they're already doing a lot of repetitive movements and a lot of cutting and jumping. So I don't maybe need to do quite as many of like those unilateral movements we were talking about. I can focus on a lot of more hamstring, like posterior chain development, and maybe some regenerative components that they're not going to get on the field. And even for as much as people forget it, like upper body strength for soccer, because nothing tells me a soccer team is more poorly trained than a non-goalkeeper with an arm, wrist, or shoulder injury. That means you don't know how to fall. You are weak as a wet kitten. You have no idea what you're doing. Like you're not training upper body, whatever.
Yeah, definitely, man. It's something that we see all the time. thinking that football, like soccer, is just to run and to have stamina, but then they forget also the strength part. And you mentioned that of course, you try, of course, to figure it out first with the coach, and then just try to complement whatever he's doing in the fields. What do you call a high intensity day? Like, what's the set range or the rep range, and then also like the intensity of the loads that you're moving?
Yeah, most of the time you're looking at above 85, like 90 plus for a lot of stuff. And usually rep range is like 1 to 3. Like sometimes when we get further in the season, we're looking at like maybe some cluster sets with like short rest periods in between, or some sort of accommodating resistance on like our high dynamic days. But it really depends on the training age of like the athletes. I know I've had some soccer teams in the past that are really into the weight room, like, and don't let off the gas when it comes from fall to summer, preseason going into the fall. But I've also had some teams at different places as well that completely drop off the face of the earth when it comes to the fall. So when you're trying to plan for a high-low day and they come into the weight room, like there's no way they're hitting 90%, because if you only have, they don't know what it feels like anymore. They're completely taxed and they're basically detrained at that point. So you have to kind of just, again, fill the other buckets that you can touch on, knowing that if you hit them with something super high intensity and their movement pattern's not good, or they're coming after practice and they're super fatigued, like you're just going to run them into the dirt. And then most coaches that are already thinking like that, and like the weight room is a completely secondary afterthought, you're going to like make them sore, or you're going to like fatigue them so much that you'll probably scare either the athletes or the coach away, and then you won't see them for the rest of the season. So you kind of have to bite the bullet a little bit and kind of placate a little bit to them, and kind of stroke maybe some coaches' egos a little bit to do what's best for the athletes in the long run, rather than just feed like your coaching ego, and keep them coming back, knowing that you can make a bigger impact the more that you see them, versus just do the one thing that you know is going to be the most beneficial, but never see them for the rest of the season.
No, yeah, perfect, man. It sounds, because at the end of the day, you're just trying to manage in whatever's left after they do their training, right? So as you're saying, the main focus is performance. So even though it's better for them that they train a certain way, you still want to get them to be good for the game on Saturday. You don't want them too fatigued, even though probably a strength session would have been the best thing to do at that point. So it's kind of like adapting a little bit to whatever they're doing in the training. Would you say that?
Yeah, I would say that. Like at the end, you just got to keep the main thing. And like at the end of the day, the athletes are there, especially in college. Like they're there to be whatever sport they picked for that reason to play, and they want to be on the field. They want to be successful. They want to be part of that team. Like no one, like when I was working in college, like no one is coming because I'm the strength coach. No one's coming because they want to be in the weight room. Maybe that's something they enjoy, but it's never more than their sport. So you have to understand that and make sure that what you're doing is tailored to having success on the field for health and performance, and ultimately for them to compete on game day and be ready.
Yeah, perfect, man. Like as you said, keeping the main thing, and that's the sport. And now that we talked a little bit about this program that we made for a season, somebody that's in season, I also wanted to see how this approach differs from an off-season approach, which is something that we're at right now. A lot of the guys that we're working with are, of course, in vacation. They're either high school or college athletes. So we go to this summer break. I wanted to know how your approach with the training plan changes in season and off season.
Yeah, if it's off season and like if I'm working with athletes, like it's really about understanding what their goals are and what they want to get out of it, and also understanding if they really are committed to what they want to do. And soccer, like if we're talking soccer, you really have to figure out at the college level, does that coach really care about spring games, or are they just really like tune up games where you're trying to feel out the new team and stuff like that? And I mean, they can be the same thing for high school or club teams when it's not your traditional year. And I know everybody wants to win, but at the end of the day, like at the college level, like if you're not in the college cup, you're not winning your conference, you're not an NCAA tournament, like by the end of fall and you're playing past Thanksgiving, then who cares if you won a spring game by like 1-0? Who cares? And that's my first thing. Like in the off season, if I'm looking at college, like how important is our development? How much time, how much energy, how much effort are you going to allot to me in order to start working with your team? And then from there, we'll backtrack again. Like how many days do I get? How often do I get them? Like per NCAA rules, what the coach is willing to give me. And then we can hammer it from there. Because if I'm looking at a college season, I'm getting them in mid-January, and then I have until essentially August, like excluding like a little bit of that preseason, to really train, develop, prepare them for a full upcoming like no holds bar, like fast in season, especially like at a high level. So if they're allowing me that much time and opportunity to do it, then it's about me programming it and putting it in perspective to the athletes that this is going to be a long, like sought out grind, but it's going to get you ready to be competitive. And putting that in perspective I think is super helpful for them. There's so many ways you can do it, but the most important thing I think when you're just thinking generally for the off season is just how consistent and how committed are you going to be from the time your last game was played, whether you won or you lost that off season. You take a little bit of time off to just kind of recharge and reload. How committed and consistent are you going to be from now until first game of the next season?
Definitely, man. And something about the U.S. system, if you want to call it like that, which differs, for example, from Colombia, is that you have this 6-month seasons or 5-month, 4-month seasons, and this can be beneficial in this part because then, for example, for me, it was just like a month and a half that I will have from off season, and off season ends up being the time in which you can develop and work on those things that you don't necessarily have the time to work on during season. So then having this 8-month period from January to August to work on those things, I think it can really yield good results if the athlete is committed enough. And as you said, if the coach allows you to do it. So I imagine during this time, you can afford to be a little bit more sore. You can put the load a little bit up. Or how does a training look like normally? We mentioned that you normally go for a 1 to 2 rep range. How would this go during off season?
Yeah, you can basically drive up the volume a lot more too. And like, even though practice and skill development and stuff like that, you can kind of work on those things, there's still a lot of opportunity in like strength gains and like even body changes, whether it be like if you're trying to build up, most soccer players or maybe some defenders or strikers want to actually like build up a little bit of muscle, and maybe some other people want to kind of get back to whatever their normal off-season weight is. Like you can work on some hypertrophy stuff on the front end of that season. But yeah, a lot of strength development, like addressing some weaknesses and maybe some deficiencies you had the previous season, or if it's your first season, like with the program or kind of young, early in your careers, developing really good training patterns and habits, movement patterns. And then, like I said, working on some of those deficiencies and building an overall great foundation leading into the season. Because you said yourself, like, it's a 5+ month season if you're going through to playoffs and beyond. And like, I think like the College Cup was like the first or second weekend in December. And if if you're starting preseason in July and the first matches are in like mid-August, like before some places even start school. So it's a long period of time that you need to make sure that you're prepared for the long haul, essentially. So yeah, a lot of strength work, a lot of foundational movements and like big body movements, and slowly kind of trickling in a little bit of that conditioning. But like the off season, like you can work on a lot of speed development, a lot of technique, a lot of like agility and change of direction, like work that you can fine tune because you have the time. And then as you get closer and closer to season and practice starts taking more of a precedence, you can start watching the athletes transition and take some of that technical work that they've been practicing and put it into the sport where they're actually more variables. There's more stuff going on because you need it to feel natural. And an athlete's always going to revert back to whatever's natural. The body wants to do whatever's easiest. So if you don't understand like how to run loose, how to like heel, like strike at the right point on the forefoot, if you don't practice that stuff hard in the off season or correct deficiencies, as soon as an athlete goes full speed or they see a ball or there's a back cut or they're trying to cross it in a certain spot, they're going to revert back to what they naturally feel is easiest or what feels more comfortable for them. So off season is really about maybe changing patterns for people that have some issues and then correcting those deficiencies and building strength.
Would you recommend the athlete before the actual season starts again? So let's say I'm going back the 4th of August, like to maybe deload before the actual team session starts again?
I think depending on like what you're working with the coach, if you know like all that, like your calendar, essentially everything, and you have a good idea of what preseason like consists of, maybe even if it's not the first couple weeks, but you know like a little bit of what the schedule is based off of experience from the previous season, deloading is probably a little bit helpful. But if like a good coach would already kind of build that in essentially, because you know that anytime there's a transitional period, like you need to build in a little bit of acclimatization and like knowing that intensity is always going to increase, whether like you think about it or not, when you go back to your team, because chances are most people are training by themselves, like especially a college setting. Like some guys might be playing on the same club team or be in the same area, but you know well, if you play team sports, like when you get everybody together and it's like the first couple of weeks and you're back in front of the coach, like what you thought was 100% intensity a couple weeks ago is 10% of what's going to be like when coach is there, like on the whistle, and it's like the first couple of days of practice. And that's why you see most of the soft tissue injuries happen probably in the first 3 days. And it's not because of 2 days anymore. It's because everybody's actually cutting and changing direction. They're playing the sport. They're kicking the hell out of each other. It's going to happen. I would start to slowly taper off a little bit of the volume and be ready to go.
Also, what I said to some of our athletes, like of course you want to improve some stuff and work in the off season, but also like prepare for the intensity again. Like you can't just train 3 times a week and then you go back to your team and you train 5 or 6 days and have 2 games a week. Like your body has to be prepared for the season again. And it's also really important.
And that relates back to what you said, Nick, of treating the off season as a preparation for that season and making those adjustments that you didn't necessarily have the time to work on during the season. So really approaching it as a fixing stage, and then a stage in which you can afford to go a little bit more intense, and not necessarily you can afford it, but that you should go a little bit more intense because you want to make sure that you're ready for that season, and that when that preseason comes in which you put the load a little bit up, that you're ready for it and then you don't risk suffering an injury.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you're not winning any games. If you're playing in the fall, you're not winning any games in the spring. But you could certainly lose some games like based off of what you're doing when you get to the fall, based off what you did in the spring. So yeah, keep the main thing, and like actually have a real developmental season. Like be smart about how you progress leading into preseason, like deload appropriately, be ready to kind of slowly taper off. And then also same thing, ramp up leading into that preseason so that you don't lose half your team in week 1 before you even get to play a game.
Especially now that, of course, we're coming into season, and many of the teams, as you said, like they just put the load off and they just start doing it. And as we were saying, 3 months or 5 months or whatever it is that the off season takes, it's enough time to prepare well, but then it's also enough time to lose whatever progress you've made. So just kind of treating it in the right way so you're able to come back the best way possible. I think that's something key, especially now for our athletes, and then also for all the athletes that are coming back, for them to know how to approach this last stage so they're ready to go and they don't suffer any injury, and also they can perform in the best way possible. So really key insights over there, man. I don't know if Matthew, you have anything else to say about that training part?
No, I think like the main focus is also like, just like I said, like to prepare for intensity again, also doing some injury prevention, especially in sports like football. Because if you just train on your own, of course, like no one's gonna kick your foot. But then you go into the practice with everyone's ambition to show the coach like what they worked on, and of course you're gonna get some contact. What's it called like this?
That's what I like to see.
Oh man, and now that we talked a lot about the training part and also the collegiate level, something that I find really, really fascinating and really interesting about the things that you've done is that transition to the military. Well, not necessarily transition because you said that you had it from the beginning, but I wanted to ask you like how you got introduced to that tactical part, the army and all of that. How did it start from the beginning?
Yeah, like I said, I think it was just kind of already built in me and a little bit indoctrinated just from the get-go. And I think same as collegiate side, I didn't really know that there were strength coaches necessarily, like you could make a career out of it. And I remember like as I was getting closer and closer in college, like you would see or hear about like maybe some coaching opportunities in the tactical setting, but most of the time it's like the same it was like professional in college when it started off. It was like at the top tier, it was at the elite kind of ones, and you didn't really know what it was until it started trickling down. And I kind of looked into some of those opportunities, just being like on base and trying to see like what it entailed. And it started to kind of flourish from there. Like you'll see coaches in every aspect, like the Army has the HCF program, like Air Force and the Navy, all of them have like different kind of spin-offs of it. The Marine Corps kind of does their own stuff in-house, except for like SOCOM side. But yeah, I think later in my career, like I wanted to find a way to kind of blend the two together. And then obviously like joining the Army, like and joining the reserves, like a couple of years ago, like on the tail end of everything, it only made more sense to kind of see if I could put all those things together. So working over like at Air Force, like special operations now, and kind of working with those airmen has been a good transition into everything.
Yeah, and I mean, you have scored like a very huge experience in the collegiate level with the athletes. But how does that training program, how does the training approach differ from now being in the Army, actually in the tactical side? What are the main differences that you see?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of similarities to everything. I would say so. I think as it pertains to like coaching, it's a little bit different based off of where, like what your role is or like what your title or essentially like who's paying you. Because we're contractors. A lot of the strength coaches are contractors, either through some sort of contracting company or even like the DoD, like on the government side. And we work with whoever essentially is the unit, squadron, battalion that we're going to be assigned to. And it's very similar to what it'd be like in a college or pro setting, working with a team.
Okay.
The different, like probably the main difference is like you would usually report to like a head strength coach would be kind of your boss if that's not already you, and you would go to like report to the head sport coach, and that's kind of like the ultimate determinant. Like, hey, this is what practice looks like. This is what schedules looks like. This is how I envision the team. This is what we want to do to prepare, and you kind of have all the tools to go with. Like on the tactical side, like all those individuals have their own job, like PT, like physical training, like development, all that stuff is a part of what they do, but it's not necessarily like the be all end all, like the performance based thing. So like in the college, like athletic setting, what I do prepares them for a game. Like what we're doing prepares them a little bit for their job. It also prepares them for their PT test in some ways, for life after like service, as well as for a lot of them like combat and like basically being fit for duty. So there's a lot more that kind of entails when it comes to the tactical side, more so than just kind of performance-based metrics, I would say.
Yeah, and I mean, we mentioned how with an athlete, you go for the specific sport and then engineer back the metrics that you're looking at, or those pillars that you're looking at, for example, speed, strength, endurance, depending on the sport. With in the Army, with the military, what are those things that you're looking at, or how do you base your pillars whenever you're working with these individuals?
I would say it's pretty similar to, like, I would say a lot of the stuff you can do is, I mean, you got to be a generalist a little bit at everything. Like when I look at the tactical population, specifically like who I work with, like on Air Force Special Operations side, and then even like with my unit, because I'm in charge of PT and like developing like our physical training program. And usually I'm like in charge of our ACFT and like our PT tests for my company in the Army, is just being a generalist at everything. Like you kind of have to be ready and resilient and ready to basically do a little bit of everything. And then you can tie in a little bit to like what your job specialty looks like and some of the tasks that are being associated with, because different units and different like job specialties in the military require different physical demands. And you can kind of understand that someone that's like an adjunct general or that's doing a lot of desk work a little bit different than being maybe in the field as an infantryman, or like for my company, like an engineer and being outside all day working heavy machinery or laying lumber down, or like building buildings or deconstructing, like all that stuff is going to be a little bit more labor intensive. So tailoring it to that and understanding that at the end of the day, like you have to be ready for everything, not just a PT test and not just like what your job entails, but also worst case scenarios too. You have to like make sure that you're not specializing in something so much that everything else starts to suffer.
Yeah, because I mean, you wanna go, bro.
Would you call it more like a preparation for life in general, or like for different opportunities, and like as an athlete you prepare for one match?
Yeah, I would say so. Like in a lot of ways, you can kind of, like I said, be a generalist and like just a Swiss Army knife with a lot of stuff. You'll start to see it's a little bit different, like in the tactical side, because a lot of people already either embrace training or enjoy it, or have like a way that they like to do it outside of what is either just assigned to them. Because that's the other difference too. Like if I wasn't here and I wasn't working with them like as a contractor coach, they would still be doing PT. Like they still would be training. Their job would still be difficult. They would still be doing the same tasks, and they would still be doing a PT test. So in a lot of ways, like we have to work in conjunction with what they're doing already and just kind of assist and be like the subject matter expert. Like, hey, how can we improve performance? How can we holistically make you guys healthier, like make the wellness better, educate you a little bit more, maybe help shape what you do for PT so that you can mitigate some of these injuries, so that you can kind of program in a more logical way and maybe take a little bit of that work off of their shoulders so they can focus on their job. But at the end of the day, like, I mean, I'm in the military, but I'm not in that squadron. I'm not in the Air Force. I'm not with them. So they're listening to me when it comes to like performance and training and how to execute like some of these movements and educating them on these things. But they're going to listen to their first line leadership and their NCOs and their commanding officer and anybody that's in a higher role than them in the chain of command, because they're in the service, like they're their leader, they're part of the squadron, they're going to do all the day-to-day stuff. Like PT is part of what they do, it's not what they do. So that's kind of the biggest thing is you got it. Like we talked about athletics, keep the main thing. Like they're in the Air Force, they're in the Marine Corps, they're in the Army, they're in whatever. It's a part of what they do. It's not everything. So you have to be able to kind of be able to do everything too.
Out of the
and I was actually going to say that same thing, keeping the main thing, because at the end of the day, what you do is giving them tools so they can do their job in a better way and they can withstand it physically. But at the end of the day, they want to perform well in the combats, and they have their specific training programs for that, I suppose. And that's what they're going to prioritize, no?
Yeah, I would say like they have, I mean, everybody's a little bit different. I think some people embrace the training a little bit more so than others, but also like if they're already training themselves outside of what is kind of mandated based off their unit or what their commander kind of has in place, a lot of them like already have goals in mind of things they want to do. Like there's some that come up to me like, hey, I want to run this half marathon like coming up. I want to learn how to do Olympic lifting. Like there's all these different things that they want to do. And it's different from like collegiate athletics where it's like, hey, I'm going to put the program together to get you best at your sport. And it might not be exactly what you want to do necessarily. It might not be, there's so many ways that you could do it to get them better at their sport, but this is the way that I think is best fit for you to be successful on the field. For training, like in the military and like working with them as a contractor, like there is a lot more blending of, hey, are you fit for duty? Can you pass your PT test? Like, can you do your job well? What would you like to do? Do you have any other goals in mind? And it's finding kind of like the best blend of that and still being able to tie that into their like social life, like their family life, like their military life. Like there's so many competing factors. And that's why like that holistic approach and trying to combine all those things so it can be done consistently and they really embrace it, and make kind of PT a part of their life, like outside of just what they're doing now, but even when they take the uniform off, like that's huge.
Okay. So there's also a part of, okay, they're still a person, so they have different goals in mind. So like also playing with their preferences, the goals that the things that they want to do. As you mentioned, for example, running a marathon, I don't know, doing 20 pull-ups. So you also go on those specific goals that each individual has.
Yeah, we try to blend that in and try to make the atmosphere a little bit like, obviously same as a team atmosphere, try to make it where there's a good culture, there's camaraderie and like there's competition. And yeah, there's easy ways to kind of tie in some of those simple goals. Like if someone just wants to do something like that, like, I mean, you've probably seen it too with some athletes, especially a lot of female athletes. Like I've always made my female athletes try pull-ups, and I've told them and I've warned them in the beginning, like, hey, I'm not trying to be discouraging. I'm not trying to do anything. Like we're going to get you to the point where you can do one, because if you go from 0 to 1, like that's 100% increase. And
that's you'll
like, that feeling is unknown. And like some guys can do like crank out a bunch, like even if they're pretty detrained. But to take like a female athlete from 0 to 1, 2, 3, whatever it is, like that's huge. So I'm always trying to find something like that that will maybe entice them and want them to keep training, because especially on the military side, yeah, if they're not bought into it, they're going to do the bare minimum. They're going to go in and like just do enough on the PT test not to get yelled at. They're only going to show up when they're told to show up. Like they're not really bought into it enough if someone's watching. So I want them to kind of build those habits and skills and use them and like want more. But like I said, I know not everybody is going to love it. Not everybody is going to, no one joins the military to do PT for the most part either. So you got to find a way to make it enticing and get them involved and want to come back for more. And that's one of the big differences between college, I think, and tactical, depending on who you're working with. I'll caveat with that, because I want them a lot of times to leave like training with me feeling better rather than just throwing them in the dirt, because I need them to come back. And chances are most of them lift early in the morning. They've got a full day of work right after.
Yeah, they don't want to feel miserable for that day.
Yeah, I can also imagine it goes the other way around, that you have to stop some guys of doing too much.
Yeah, it does happen. And trying to keep it in check for some of them, or at least like maybe just veer them in the right direction, I would say. I mean, it's great to see it. Like you see it in some athletes where they just have no quit and they're really just all aboard on what they're doing. But there are definitely some that know how to like tap into that like no quit mentality. And like if you don't give them a set distance, if you don't give them a time, if you tell them max to something, whether it's reps, weight, whatever it is, some of them will go until they break. So especially when it comes to programming and understanding like what their goals are, what their job is, and who they are as a person, like you need to know when is a smart time to kind of do that and when is not so smart. And with who I work with and like what we do, most of the time I don't tap into that unless it's like something competitive and fun, because they'll get that when they go to a school or they go to like a specific selection, or they need to have that for like an exercise or training they have like coming up in a couple weeks. And because we're special operations, we're rapid deployment. So they have to kind of be ready to go like closer at a moment's notice than normal operations would be.
Because I had that when I was younger. My coach told me to do like a recovery run after a game, for example. But then I was like 15, 16. I was like, okay, when I go on a run, let's crank out, like let's go 100%. I mean, I'm running already, because I could have used someone like a coach like telling me, no, like that's a recovery run is to go slow and get ready again for the next practice.
Like, yeah, that's helpful. It's helpful for sure to like kind of be able to reel them in.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes you're too conscientious about it, and you're thinking like, no, the more I do, the better it's gonna be. But then you're also playing. I mean, in my case, it got me to a knee surgery, just going over my limits, and it's something that I try to pound on my athletes now. That there's a point where you don't need to stop. You just need to like regulate yourself, and it doesn't mean don't do anything, but whatever you're doing, do it with consciousness, knowing what you're doing. Okay, until what point you're gonna go, and when you recover, knowing what you're doing, whatever you're doing, like why you're stretching, why you're going into the sauna or whatever you want to do, but like being conscious of how your body feels and what are the things that are going to help it recover. So I think that's that thing that Matt's touched on is very key. And yeah, man, like I think it's a very nice talk, brother. There's a lot of things here that really fascinate me and that I would like to speak on for the whole day. Not only from the beginning when we talked about all your journey coming up and then being surrounded by all these high level people, and that ultimately being the factor that got you into coaching. But then also when you got into coaching, all these valuable things that you just talked to us about, how to train with your off season, how to train with your in season, also having that communication with the sports coach, because at the end of the day, what we're looking for is that performance-based training, and that it reflects on the game. So definitely a lot of valuable things that I'm gonna go ahead and apply with my athletes as we leave the call. So I really appreciate you for taking the time. I don't know if you have anything else to say.
I think it's very interesting call, very valuable. Also for me personally, like seeing how you approach the off season and like what kind of stages are in there. And yes, I think it was a very good call. It was a long one as well. I enjoyed it.
Oh, perfect, man. And I don't know if you're okay with that. We can go through some rapid fire questions just to finish it off.
Yeah, far away.
Perfect, man. Which character trait could a college athlete use which gets started at the military?
I would say discipline. That's kind of key to everything. Being disciplined is huge.
Okay. And in what way is it taught in the military? I mean, of course we know, but like just for you to give us an example of one part in which discipline is trained.
I think you're gonna get to a lot of points where you're gonna want to quit. There's gonna be a lot of stuff that's like pretty difficult, like your commitment level and like how determined and dedicated you are to it. Like at the end of the day, if you're not disciplined and you're meticulously like trying to execute those goals, you're gonna falter, or you're gonna break instead of bend at some points in time.
Okay, perfect, man.
I think it's also like applicable on every area of life, not just sport or anything. I think it's perfect. So sure. One word to describe the most effective leaders you've served with in the Army.
I'd say humble. I think the leaders that are really willing to listen to anybody else, like close to them, anybody from the lowest ranking enlisted like soldier, like all the way up to above them, like their boss, being able to kind of be willing to listen and kind of take that information and understand that there might be a better way to do it, or there's more to than just doing it how we've always done it, and being flexible and humble enough to not let your ego take over. I think those leaders have been super successful, and I try to emulate that as much as possible with either how I'm leading or kind of how I take criticism or listen from others.
Yeah, and I think we would imagine that the most successful one are the ones with the biggest ego, but they're in that situation because they've been humble enough to listen to the opinions of other people, to listen to the lessons of other people. So kind of like always having that approach of, okay, I'm gonna learn for everything, even if I'm a captain and this person just arrived here, if they have something to say that might be good, I'm gonna listen. I think that's great, man.
What also like for for a leader not to listen to someone else like in a lower position just shows that he's not confident in his own ability, because he's scared like someone will have a better idea, for example.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean it applies to everything, but we have meetings all the time. You go out and do spot checks and you talk to everybody that's kind of doing all the daily tasks all the time, and like that soldier knows what they're doing better than anybody else. And my role is not to know their job as well as them. My role is to be able to put them in a position to be successful, give them the resources and like reward those things and hold them accountable and kind of make sure that the company and like platoon is going in the right direction and we're doing things properly. And I'm going to listen to that person because they know everything about what they're doing. And yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. Like everybody has something to say, and behind closed doors, like whoever's got the best idea should win. And I don't care what your rank is. It doesn't matter.
Definitely, man. Definitely. Nick, and you've been in multiple scenarios, in different environments. How has your coaching style developed and changed throughout this time?
I think it's developed just by getting so much broad experience and like seeing different sports, being in different settings, like different conferences, different areas of the country, things like that. I think one thing that's really kind of helped is like it's developing like a coaching eye and like being a little bit more patient at times with how I approach stuff. Like I think I've been able to develop a little bit more of like what my standards and expectations are. But in terms of style, like I think that being more deliberate and kind of patient with how I deliver those things has been one of the bigger changes, because I think every coach can go full bore and like bring the juice every single day and like really get fired up. But to sustain that over time and to know when there's a time and a place to do that, I think that just takes experience and being a little bit more patient and understanding that like, hey, it's their game day or this is their moment and I'm supposed to be hyped up for them, not with them necessarily. I think that's been helpful. And I think you get it as you pay attention, you get older, like within the profession too.
And comes with experience.
Definitely.
That's why we're here to talk to you, so we can get some advice.
Yeah, no, I know I'm older than you guys by a little bit. Yeah.
To switch it around, is there something that people in the Army can learn from a college athlete?
Yeah, I think, obviously, like if we're talking just even performance, like just dedication to your craft, I think that happens like in the military. Like people are really like soldiers, like airmen, like Marines are all really like sailors, all of them, they're really proud of what they do and like they're dedicated to what they do, but understanding a little bit more so of like what seasonal training looks like and like how periodization looks like too. I think that's helpful. And maybe not even when it comes to strength and conditioning, but like understanding a little bit of like, hey, there's going to be lulls in a season. There's going to be like transition points. There's going to be really high intensity times, like competitive season. There's going to be times where, hey, maybe the focus is on training. And I think the military does a good job in a lot of ways of like, hey, you're going to a school to go learn this. Like that's your developmental season. Hey, you have some leave time. You're coming back and you get some time off to like kind of recoup. And then like, okay, well, we're gearing up for a deployment. Here's your preseason. All right, we're going on a training exercise deployment. Like here's your in-season. I don't know necessarily if every service member thinks of it in that manner, but I think if they could look at it in that manner and kind of treat their training and treat their approach to that a little bit more, it would be beneficial to maybe understanding their body and like the needs. And because like I said, like nutrition, sleep, performance training, like injury mitigation, all those things that like we kind of learn from training in sports, all those things are inherently helpful for a service member that's going to be either in the line of duty, law enforcement officers, like firemen, like military personnel. Like you're doing something either strenuous, like in harm's way for a long period of time, high intensity, stressful, like teaching it like that. And like, because you can't just go 100% all the time. So
your limits.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I mean, of course, if you, for example, as you said, like fireman or somebody in the military, of course, your main duty is being in combat or whatever it is that you have to do. Then you also have to be prepared in the physical part to do that. And that's where the training and nutrition all comes into place. And that's just going to make it better for you in the moment that you have to perform your task. So I think that what you just said is great.
Just a switch of perspective. Like, of course, like if you think 100% all the time, maybe just many people refer just to training, like giving 100% in the weight room, but also like giving 100% like Camilo said, in nutrition and recovery, like giving 100% in like all together.
Definitely, man.
Like 100%. Like you can give your 100% of your day, like 100% of your 100% that day. Like if that makes sense. Like if you're going in and it's a recovery session, you can still give 100% effort to that. Like energy and effort and like your attitude is non-negotiable. Like you can go into it with a great mindset and give 100%. That doesn't mean you need to like max out. You don't have to like run your fastest like 2 mile. You don't have to do all that. It's all context and understanding that like you can give that effort all the time, just how in the manner that you're giving that effort in like what aspect, like how the variables work, that's what's going to be different.
Yeah.
I think that's key. Yeah. I think that's key, man, because it's not, as Matt said and as you just mentioned, it's not only about training, but then how do you make everything that you're doing outside of training or outside of your game or your combat intentional to help you perform better in that aspect. Sorry. And I wanted to ask you, brother, can you describe your coaching philosophy in one sentence?
It's a tough one.
Like putting a lot of stuff into one sentence.
I know. I'm trying to think. I don't know. I'll put it as this. Like it's just my philosophy with stuff is just like it's never quitting. It's always forward. So like I think if you're failing, fail fast, fail forward. Like it's never fatal. So my training philosophy and like my coaching philosophy is like it's all about progression. So if we're progressing towards our goal, we're getting better. That's great. So never quit, always forward.
That's perfect.
And that was, I think that was the next question that we wanted to ask. How do you approach failure inside your training program? And now that you're talking about it, just tell us.
Hey, well, that's perfect. I mean, learn to like kind of embrace it. Like, I think reflecting on it, learning from it, having humility again, and just working to overcome it. That's kind of how I look at it. And you can take practical approaches to it. Like if I have coaches that I work with or like interns or anybody that's kind of helping me with coaching, if I don't, I just do it myself, is just kind of having like an AAR and just looking back and debriefing on either a training session, a training program, a cycle, a season, whatever it is, like what worked well, what didn't work well, what could we have done differently? And if you look at that objectively through a lens and you really are like true to progress and like critiquing yourself or having other people critique it without and providing that feedback without any sort of like ill will or repercussions for it, you're only going to advance and make things better. So that failure is kind of a part of it. So making sure that like you fix that failure and you don't repeat it, that's the most important thing.
I think that's key, and something that I try to live by is if I make growth the ultimate goal, like I never fail because every failure is learning. And when I'm learning, I'm growing. So it really means that I'm succeeding my goal, you know? So not trying to make the goal just a specific milestone, because if you don't achieve it, then it's kind of like a loss. But then making growth the ultimate goal. That's kind of like how I like to approach it.
I like it.
Great. What do we say is the biggest mistake athletes do that harm their performance?
Probably doing stuff too fast. I think a lot of them, especially nowadays, I'm starting to see it more and more. Like, it's not a bad thing to want to emulate, like maybe some of like your heroes or who you think is really successful, like in your sport or maybe on your team, stuff like that. But understanding that there's reasons why that person got so successful, and you can't, especially looking at social media and taking what they post as face value and not understanding all the other things they do. Like, this is a snapshot this could be a picture from 40 days of training, and they just decided to put one picture up, and that's like what you rely upon. It's not you, and it's not the whole story. So finding ways that kind of fix and address the things that you need to work on, and understanding that it's long-term athletic development. It's not a quick fix, and like you're gonna have, I'd hate to say it, but like delayed gratification. Like you're not going to have success every single day. There's going to be failures. There's going to be chances where you're going to mess up and fall on your face, but just keep, like you said, like that growth, and keep moving forward, and not try to just have success off the get-go, or cheat the process and move faster than you're ready for. I think that's huge for, I mean, young athletes, intermediate athletes, advanced athletes too. Like it's your progress. So work kind of at your pace, and then push it.
I love it, man. And I think it relates to something I saw the other day that said, don't compare your first chapter to somebody else's chapter 20. You know, like what they're posting is what they do now, that they're successful, that they already achieved it. They didn't do that when they were 18 years old growing up, you know. They also went through that process. It's just that we're looking at the successful part of it.
Yeah, that comparison mentality can really destroy a lot of people.
I think there's a saying for social media, like you're comparing your whole life to someone else's highlights.
Exactly.
Because a lot of people are not very transparent on social media. They just post the perfect stuff.
Yeah. Definitely, man. And now to finish it off, Nick, just if you can leave us with one advice to young athletes, which one would it be?
Yeah, I think I'll kind of say the same thing like I mentioned before when I was trying to figure out how to summarize everything into one sentence. It's just never quit and always move forward. I think there's a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of things you can kind of do, like do as much as you can, continue, like embrace that failure and keep working towards your goals. Like set lofty goals and don't sacrifice. Like we'll sacrifice as much as you want to try to get those, like, but don't at any point in time quit on yourself, and don't quit on your progress, because at some point in time, like you said, you'll look back and you'll realize like where you started step one, and like see how far you progressed, and then see how much more you have to really give and put forward to ultimately like make whatever your athletic and competitive dreams come true. So keep at it.
I love it, man. I think it's a great way to finish it off. Nothing else I can add to that, man. So as I said before, I really like this conversation, man. Just looking forward to maybe speaking again in the future, and just stay in touch. Just stay in touch and keep in touch to see each other's progress. And yeah, man, I appreciate you for coming here and providing us with so much value.
Yes, thank you very much. Also from my side, it was a pleasure.
No, I appreciate you guys having me on. It was good to meet you. Definitely let me know. We'll run it back someday.